minute since I went live and want to go ahead and do a market update because last week, the weeks before, and leading up to the Fed fund rate decision, a lot of people were talking, and I mentioned them like, hey, we're seeing rebounds in the market, but it's not going to be a straight line. So here we're going to go over it. And again, if you join late, no worries. I usually post these to my YouTube later, which is the links in the bio. So let me go ahead and pull up. Oh, no, not that. Some stuff here. Bam. Let's pull up some data for everybody. First things we want to go over is the charts, the bond market, which that is too big to see. Is that any better? Nope. Well, shit. Let's see if the one from yesterday, because it's close to the same today. Big. Why? Why is it too big? I thought I got this thing resized. Oh well. Well, you can kind of see the market. I'll move out the way. We're down 7 basis points, but we've lost about 60 basis points in the last few days, which means rates have gotten a little bit higher. But this is part of the process. This week's going to be busy. CPI and PPI come out Thursday and Friday, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be market moving. But really, what I wanted to cover on this live today, not only was the market, but some discussion I've had in my comment sections where going back and forth with a few people that were like arguing if institutional investors are buying up single family homes. And I showed the stats and data and they kept wanting to argue, but it's kind of like this graphic here. So these are the main companies that own all the food groups. So when somebody's trying to argue like, oh, Blackstone or BlackRock or this one doesn't own or buy up residential real estate, that's because they don't understand the structure in which they purchase residential real estate. Because part of the reasons why huge wealthy institutions and groups weren't buying single family was the management aspect. So what they've done is buy up the huge companies that own the management side of it. Like I'm going to show you here. So I wanted to show this for you so you can understand. This is also why when we talk about food prices being out of control, when 7 companies own every brand, they're really not much competition to keep prices low and they can control the market. Same things that's going on in housing. And I'm a loan officer. This is what I do every day for the last 10 years. So when I see people that just do their research off of Yahoo News and Reddit, I'm like laughable because I'm going to show them stats and data from CoreLogic that aggregate this stuff for industry professionals and not just opinion pieces. But yeah, let's pull up some more stuff for people. Like this stuff is why is scary. And when people say that it's not, like this is what is coming for the everyday person. And I get out in the way so you can screenshot this stuff. Because it's important to know what we're facing collectively. Here are the biggest shareholders of that. And it's like, this is no joke. So when I see people arguing, thanks to everyone who's joined, that big, huge institutional investors aren't buying single family residents, this is a lie. They are. And this is why it's driving up prices. And everybody who owns a home enjoys the appreciation that we get because we build wealth. Hey, everybody that's joining, we build wealth through our home ownership 2 ways. One, principal balance reduction, creating forced savings, growing our equity position, but also appreciation. And appreciation has been consistent. Now, there has been times in our history where home prices went down, but it's very rare. And I'm going to go over on this live the reasons why home prices went down. So let's look at this, and I'll screenshot this. This is home price appreciation in the United States on average since 1942. Go to Case-Shiller, CoreLogic. They have all this stuff aggregated for you. Why did home prices go down between 2007 and 11? Well, there's a couple factors. One, the regulations on the industry were nothing. The guidelines were if you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan. So there was false demand created in the market for property. And that means there were stated income loans. So if you told me, hey, Ron, I made 500 grand and you make 50, but your credit was decent, they're giving you loans based on 500 grand. So then people were going out and buying a bunch of property because look at what happened before. Oh yeah, there was consistent gains. And home prices are stable, but when you have the largest decline or a huge decline in population and you've overbuilt for demand, look at look at when the prices went down and look at the difference between housing formations and housing completions. Completions are homes being built. Formations are people entering the market to purchase or rent a property. Completions outpace formations massively. Now, since 2015, look, it's reversed. We have a shortage of homes. And when big, huge companies are buying up massive amounts of inventory, the normal buy cycle, a first-time home buyer, they're in their home 3 to 6 years. But an institutional investor that's buying it to hold for their portfolio, they're not. So those homes are no longer entering back into the market. And again, like I'm gonna show people facts and data and not just opinions. Core logic is huge. Go and look this stuff up yourself. Like, it's everywhere. If you got questions, put it in the comments. But that's what I'm here to talk about today is what's going on in the market. Is now a good time to buy? I've also had some conversations with others where like, I don't think everybody should be able to buy a home. I disagree. I think everyone should have the right and access to purchase a property, build long-term generational wealth through home ownership. It is one of the key pillars to building home ownership. I mean, building wealth is that. Now, some people need help and education on how to be emotionally regulated enough to maintain and be successful in home ownership, but that's something that us professionals can help with because our schooling system and our education system is not designed to help people build that long-term generational wealth or get them in a path of freedom. And again, this is where I'm different from certain loan officers. Obviously, I want you to get a home, but I want you to be able to comfortably afford the home. I'm going to give you the heads up on what you should look out for in home ownership that could cause you to have issues. Like many people aren't aware when they're first buying a property that your mortgage is fixed. Typically, if you have a 30-year, 15-year, whatever fixed rate, your principal and interest is fixed. But your property taxes and your homeowner's insurance can go up every year. Now, there's ways to help reduce the amount that your property taxes go up by making sure you have the proper exemptions in place. But that doesn't mean it won't ever go up. Same thing with homeowners insurance. Like that stuff can go up every year. And it's important to know that because if you max out your budget and then your property taxes or insurance goes up, you're now in a position where you're overextended. Again, people need to be able to be aware of this and educated through the process. Again, successful in homeownership. But the way that properties appreciate in the country and on average, and you see the shortage of supply, it's going to continue that way. So some people putting their head in the sand thinking, oh, I'll just buy in a couple of years when I can afford it. You won't be able to afford it. Buy what you can comfortably afford now. If you're living in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, buy a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. Like they're for sale everywhere. Or if you're struggling with some of the, if your debt to income ratio, there's ways to structure certain properties. Buy a fourplex. You can 3 of the live in one side, rent out the other 3, or a duplex, live in one side, rent out the other side. Buy a property with an ADU, it's an accessory dwelling unit. That can help offset some of the hits. There's ways to get it done. You just need to have an interview with a good local licensed residential mortgage loan officer who's going to put together a strategic plan to help achieve your current and long-term goals that are prudent and suitable with your financial goals. And that's the difference between having somebody that is an actual licensed residential mortgage loan officer and somebody who's just a registered agent who is operating under the license of an institution. It's a total different type of ball game. And there's great loan officers on this app. I always make sure to mention that because I want people to have the opportunity to interview their loan officers and connect and just listen to different perspectives. Like Cat Loans, she is phenomenal. She's on this app. Carlos Munoz, he's on this app. There's a ton of great loan officers. It's good to chit chat with them and interview them. Ask them questions. Some great questions to ask a loan officer if you're in the market to buy a house or even refinance. Ask them, hey, when was the last time you personally purchased a property? How many properties have you purchased in the last 5 years? How many properties have you sold in the last 5 years? Because if a person hasn't experienced it themselves, it's a total different ballgame helping people do it versus going through it yourself. And I personally like to buy and sell property consistently. And I closed on the house that me and my partner Monica are in right now. We closed on it in July of 2023 and sold our other property in November of 2023. And we bought property, right before the pandemic. we just move property because we understand the market and how to capitalize on the different positions. And so I'm talking from lived experience, not just the fact I've helped 2,000 families over the last 10 years with their home investment journey. Because when it's your personal property, you have a little bit more invested in the deal. And I know how to structure things. And that's why it's important to interview your realtor too, because you want to make sure that your realtor is closing business and not just a couple deals a year. We're talking they should be doing 30, 40, 50 deals a year because they're going to know what the market's going, what's the pulse of the market, how to negotiate. They're going to have good relationships with sellers on the other side if you're a buyer, and they're going to help you to reduce the stress of buying. Because let me be honest with you guys, buying or selling a home is in the top 5 stressful things a person goes through. They maybe do it 2 to 3 times their entire life. So validate your stress and concern. But there's ways to help calm that stress down so you don't have to be afraid. But ask questions. You're in charge of this process. When you talk to a loan officer, ask the questions that are going to make you feel comfortable. We don't know what we don't know, but that's where we get ahead of it. Ask the loan officer, hey, what are some of the questions that I don't even know to ask you? I'm a first-time home buyer. What are some of the things that you wish you would have done as a first-time home buyer? And what would you have done differently if you could go back in time? Ask some questions like that to help reveal some things, because a good loan officer is going to do what's called a B1 or borrower one introduction call, whatever their process is. And in that, we're asking questions. So, and I'm going to give you some of the behind the scenes on this live so you know why loan officers are asking for certain things, why they're asking for certain documents. And if you have questions, put it in the comments. So thank you everybody who's joining. My name's Ron Toy. I'm with the Ron Toy team at Cross Country Mortgage. I'm a licensed residential mortgage loan officer. I help individuals, families, and investors get the financing they need to invest in residential real estate. But if you have questions, put in the comments. On that introductory call, I'm going to ask you, first and foremost, how did you meet your referral partner? Like most people come to me through a realtor. I want to know how you got to know your realtor and help reiterate the strength of that realtor if it's a good relationship. Or I'm going to ask, how long have you been thinking about buying? What held you back from buying in the past? Because I'm trying to reveal pain points. Because if I can help you, if I can identify your pain, I can validate it and also proactively address it. Because some people are nervous to be vulnerable, and that's understandable. This freaking country's savage sometimes, and it's tough out here. So if I can identify why you're nervous, maybe it's your credit situation, maybe it's your income, but most people are closer to being able to buy a home than they really know. And I give this information out and I share it all the time because I don't like it when people don't have the information that they can use everywhere. If you're in Texas, look up T-Shack, look up Seth, look up TDHCA. Every loan officer can utilize these programs and they can help you with closing costs and down payment. And you can get into a home for next to nothing and get your money back at closing. And so I'm not the only loan officer that does it. So again, this isn't here to try to convince you that I'm some super special person. I love what I do. I'm here to help, but I'm trying to make sure you feel comfortable and confident with your decision to either purchase or refinance. So when you're talking about purchasing, other question loan officer is going to ask you, how long have you been at your current job? The reason why we're asking that is when you're looking at income, you need to what we're looking for is stable and predictable income. And typically that's looked at if over a 2-year period. Now, there are programs and options where you can get it for less. What are some of the things that would cause an FHA loan to fail? Already pre-approved. So with FHA, they're a great program. So in essence, they have a little bit more flexibility with debt to income ratio, but things that would cause it to fail potentially on an appraisal, if there's major safety concerns like missing certain things, wood rotting, pests, just there's stuff that can happen there. Also, if like you get a new debt during the process that pushes your debt to income ratio over their limits, there's several things, but in essence, if you've been pre-approved ahead of time, and as long as you don't do anything on your credit, you should be fine. But if the house has issues in a third-party financing addendum, there's property approval and other things that will protect your earnest money. But yeah, that's a great question. And again, so loan officers in the beginning, most good loan officers are going to do the heavy lifting up front so that when you are putting your earnest money down, you're not worried about losing it. And so what that is it's a difference between a pre-qualification and a true underwriting approval. And pre-qualification is based on what's called AUS, automated underwriting system software, but for most of it's DU, desktop underwriting, LP, depending on the situation. That's just behind the scenes mumbo jumbo that loan officers know and people in the business. Just know that when you provide your information in an application, make sure you have your full 2-year residential history and your 2-year work history. Even if you took time off, that's okay. We're going to get what's called a letter of explanation. So some people are nervous because like, oh man, I was out of work for 3-4 months because I was looking for a job. Okay, cool. We'll just document the reason you were out for work. You're looking for a new job or whatever happened. It's fine. We just have to document that process. But I know why that could cause stress because if nobody tells you why they're asking for certain things, again, it's in the top 5 most stressful. So your anxiety is going to be lifted. It's going to increase cortisol, stress hormones, and that can cause fighting and just overall bad taste in your mouth. But if somebody's like, hey, look, the reason why I'm asking for this is I want to make sure that I have a full, complete 2-year employment history so that I can use X average for your income because maybe you have variable pay. Variable pays like bonuses, commission, if your hours vary. There's different things, but that's what your loan officer should be helping you with. That's some of the stuff that I identify in the first conversation because I have an operations background. For the first 5 years in this business, I was operations manager for our branch and I was in charge of the underwriting and processing, making sure every loan closed smooth and on time. So 5 years ago, I decided, you know what, I'm tired of cleaning up stuff after contract. I'm just going to go out on my own and be my own loan officer and fix it up front. And I love it. It's an amazing opportunity to build trust and relationships with realtors and clients. And again, it aligns with their long-term goals and current goals. But again, questions that they're going to ask. Where do you work? How are you paid? Why the question we're asking, how are you paid, is are you paid a salary? Do you get a bonus? Because some people get an annual bonus, but maybe that bonus is paid out in February. So depending on where you are in the year, and maybe you haven't gotten that bonus on your check, so it's not reflected. But if we know it's an annual bonus, we can get a written verification of employment, and then we can use the average. And so that's where some of those questions come into play. But 1 second, I have to cough. And so that's why some of those things are asked up front. If the loan officer isn't asking any of these questions, that's a concern because if they need to get to know your scenario so that they know what documentation to prepare you to provide. And so, are you self-employed? Great. How long have you been self-employed? The reason why somebody's going to ask that, depending on the program, if you've been self-employed for more than 5 years, maybe you only need 1 year tax return. But you won't know that if you don't ask the questions. And why do you need a bunch of extra documentation if you don't need it? And so that's where the loan officer is going to ask you some of those questions. If you have any, speaking of questions, if you have any, put them in the comments. I'd love to answer them. If you ran into a loan officer that asked you something weird, let me know. I'll give you my opinion or feedback. I'm here to answer questions, help maybe give you a different perspective so that you either become a homeowner or start the journey of becoming a homeowner. Also, if you've gotten a bunch of marketing material for refinances, that's been the biggest thing that I've seen right now is a bunch of push for people to refinance right now, when in most cases it would be better for the client to wait a few months because there's a thing called churning loans. And it's a thing where you're constantly refinancing somebody's deal and you can make it look good for the client, but it's hurting their equity position. And it's unfortunate. So I always like to give people the heads up front so that they don't run into that problem. But buying a house is important, but you don't have to buy. Most people think, oh, I'm going to buy a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom house, and they're living in a 1-bedroom apartment and they've never owned a house before. What would happen if the appraisal comes back less than they are asking? Appraisal 350, value 300. So that is a great question, Anthony. Thank you so much for asking it. It depends on the scenario. So say if you are the buyer in that scenario and you're an FHA, that would fall under property approval. And so then what you could do is get with the agents if you want to renegotiate. Hey, the appraisal came in $50K less. Are you willing to drop the price? That's an option. If they're not willing to drop the price, then you can get with your agents to put together comps to see if there's what's called a reconsideration of value. And so then the appraiser goes back out and gives a reason for an update to the reconsideration of value. Because sometimes a property will be under contract but not closed when the appraiser goes out. But then maybe that deal closes after the report came in. And maybe if they use that certain comp, it would have pushed the value up. Sometimes they miss certain adjustments. So there are some times where reconsideration of value will help get you back into that position. But again, if you're the buyer, you have a lot of power to either negotiate, back out of the deal because of the property approval, and also there's the reconsideration of value. Typically, to get a reconsideration of value, there has to be justification for it, i.e., missed comps, too large of adjustments for certain aspects. Like sometimes they'll adjust for, square footage or quality of construction, or, a pool. Maybe there's given a huge adjustment for the pool, and the pools really don't add a bunch of value. So there's just different things you have to look at. But that's some of the things that you would talk to proactively. When you get under contract with on a property, most of the time, if you're working with a good realtor, they're going to run comps on that property before you even put in an offer at 350, because it shouldn't be a surprise to somebody if a property comes in 50,000 under. It should be something that has a plan in place just in case it does. And in that situation, before you put an offer, most of the time realtors will put together a comps of their own to make sure that you are submitting an offer that isn't going to get into a position of stress. Sometimes stuff happens. I've seen it, and it's okay. You just have to know the steps to take care of the low appraisal. That's something that I do on my contract calls, is go over the appraisal process. Another thing, if you're in Texas, on the 1 to 4 residential contracts for the purchase contract, paragraph 13 talks about prorations. And that's important, especially right now, because property tax bills start coming out in October. And why that's important is property taxes in Texas are billed in arrears. And before the property tax bills are out, they're going to go to the CAD, or they're going to get it from the title office that's based on the previous year's bill. They're going to do an estimation of taxes, and they're going to give you a seller credit for the amount of time that from January 1 to whenever your closing date is. But once tax bills go out, it's reversed. And so that's where you're going to have to make sure that you have the right proration in place, because if they don't give you the right proration, you in the contract have the ability to go back to the seller and get that proration corrected. And I've helped clients get a couple hundred to a couple $1,000s back through just documenting and tracking that information for them. But yes, on a low appraisal, you can either negotiate for the price adjustment, maybe they give you some and you pay the difference, or you can go ahead and get a reconsideration of value and try to have the report flawed. And it's a process, but if there's comps that they miss, or the adjustments aren't right, or if you have a suspicion that maybe the appraiser was just being biased, because there have been situations that appraiser will go in and see certain stuff around a house and they'll undervalue the property. If that is any kind of suspicion, report them, because appraisers are there to do their job. They're supposed to document why they're giving the value. And if it doesn't make sense, accountability is the way to fix that. But yeah, thank you so much for that question. That was huge. Appreciate it. Anyone else, if you have questions, go ahead and put in the comments. I'm a licensed residential mortgage loan officer. If you've either bought a house, thinking about buying, or thinking about refinancing, let me know. Or maybe you're in a house, you're like, dang, I can't sell, but I have all this equity built up because my rate was so low. Let's talk. Because most people right now are also struggling with credit card debt. In the United States, our credit card debt's over $1 trillion right now. It's intense. And so many people don't realize that they could, in essence, change their life by selling and getting into a different property and paying off all their debt. Thank you for the info. First time buying a house, so trying to get oh yes. So Anthony, as a first-time home buyer, if you weren't on my live earlier, things that you need to document, whatever county you live in, Google, like I'm in Dallas, so Dallas County CAD property search, CAD, County Appraisal District, some variation, and it'll pull up the website. You put your property address in there and you'll have that. Because then, like in Texas, you can file your homestead. Some counties will let you do it online. But you want to make sure you're tracking your information on that portal, because you want to make sure you have your exemptions in place to help reduce your possibility of your payment going up the next year. because your property taxes can go up every year and your homeowner's insurance. So just pay attention to that as well, because it'll be all factored into your payment. But as a first time home buyer, some people are never told that what can happen if you have an escrow shortage. And it's nothing to scare you. It is what it is. It's just so that you can be prepared and successful in home ownership. And you can shop your homeowner's insurance every year. Just make sure you document your start date, because like say you close in November, the policies are for a year. So the escrow account's going to be set up. They're going to disperse in November and get it done, or every year. But in Texas, property taxes are paid out in December. But just so you kind of are aware of how all that kind of rocks and rolls, you can document all this stuff. If you have a good loan officer, they're going to track it for you and keep you updated. But just congrats on the house. I'm excited for you. Buying a house is huge. You'll see. I come back to my live 2 years from now, 3 years from now, when your equity position's crazy, and we're going to celebrate together. Because, man, I'm telling you, it is amazing to see how fast your equity builds just by getting into a home. And then you'll probably realize, dang, I wish I'd have done this earlier. And that's why I'm on this platform, because I know that the typical demographic for TikTok is a little bit, skews a little younger, like in the 18 to 25, 30. And of course, there's other people on this app. But if I could go back to when I was 20 years old and I had a job a couple years and I was making okay money, paying rent, this is what I'd say on every one of these lives. If I could go back in time, I would buy a duplex or fourplex, live in one side and rent out either the other side or the other 3 sides, and stay in that property at least 12 months. Then I would go and rent out my side and go buy another one as a primary residence and rent out the other sides. Because if you stay in your home 12 months, you can buy the next property as a primary, so you don't have to put down 20%. So you're putting minimum amount down, but you're building your door number. And in investment terms, that's what they're going to ask. What's your door goal? And so imagine if I could go back in time and buy a fourplex, I own 4 doors right out the jump, which helps spread my risk across the other 3 doors to help supplement the mortgage. And so then the next year, I go buy another fourplex. I have 8 doors in 24 months without ever having to put 20% down. I live in it for 12 months. Let's do it again. Now I've got another 12 doors now. And then if I did that every year for 10 straight years, and by the time I was 30, now I have 40 doors, I would be retired. Done. Because half the doors will end up covering all of the mortgages. And if you don't over leverage yourself in your position, then you're going to be okay and you can retire. I'm trying to help people buy their time back. I don't want people being strapped to their house and stuck servicing a debt. So anything I can give value and share information is why I'm on this app. I want people to be free. I want people to be able to have a home, build wealth, supplement retirement, pay off debt. Like there's so much to it. And when you own your house, you'll be able to leverage your equity over time to really, really shake things up. And it's exciting. And so like I was sharing earlier about refinances, right? Some people are being encouraged to refinance right now when selling would actually be better for them. And I did this for one of my clients not too long ago. They were looking to refinance, wanting to get 20 grand out to pay off credit cards, right? A lot of people have credit cards. It's okay. But they weren't happy in the home. They were like, well, we're thinking about selling in a year or 2 anyway. So I was like, well, if you're thinking about selling in a year or 2 anyway, if you sell, you'll actually be able to get about 60,000 out in equity, because you're not restricted to the 20% equity rule and cash out refinances. And so they sold their house, were able to pay off the debts and stick 20 grand in the bank and get into the new property. So that fits their long-term goals. So that's why you want to have those conversations with somebody who's going to maybe come at it from a different perspective, because that changed their life. And now they're in a much better home that suits their needs, paid off their debt, and have 20 grand in the bank instead of just paying off debt. And the other part is, if you're paying off credit cards and you're not getting to the heart of the issue and preparing yourself so you never get back into the credit card debt, you've put yourself in a worse position, because you've refinanced to get cash out to pay off debt, increasing your debt load on your mortgage. But if you charge the cards up again, you're right back at square one, but now you have a higher mortgage debt, and that's scary. So that's where it's like there's a lot of this that has to go into successful home ownership to identify where the issues are coming from. And a lot of it is the economy. Right now it's tough. It is tough out there. If you're paying rent, you're paying a mortgage, it's not your own. And again, like I shared earlier in my life, the home price appreciation data, buying a home is a long term investment. And yes, it appreciates every year. But also, if you, most people talk about like their parents, if they bought a house in the 80s, they're like, oh man, they're lucky. And I've said this before on lives that luck, and it's not my quote, it's a Seneca amalgamation of Seneca's quote, that luck is the intersection between preparation and opportunity. So back in the 80s, rates were near 20%. So a $100,000 house in the 80s is about equivalent to a $300,000 house now. So they weren't lucky, they were just prepared to take advantage of an opportunity when it came in front of them. And now their home that they bought in the 80s is probably worth nearly $1 million now. And so it sounds and looks like they're lucky, but people 30 years from now or 20 years from now will be looking back at you being like, dang, you bought a house for this amount at this rate. You're lucky. And it's like, no, I just was able to fight past the fear. And that's the part that gets into this. Warren Buffett talks about it's like the best time to buy is when everybody else is nervous. And that's why I bought in July of 2023. That's when the rates were the highest. And we got a freaking stunner deal on this property. We bought it for 750. It appraised for 800,000 and the sellers gave us 23 grand to help with closing costs. So in that moment, we were able to buy a house that's now worth over 900,000, but we got it for 750 plus the sellers gave us 23 grand and it appraised for 850 back then. So it's like our 800,000. So it's like we walked in with immediate equity plus the sellers helped cover the costs to get in, and it's worth way more now. And we've added another 200 plus square feet, but we were only able to do that because we took advantage of an opportunity because everybody else was nervous in the summer of 2023. So again, I bought in the height. I didn't have to make multiple offers. The sellers paid for title, paid me 23 grand. They did all these things. Also, I work with great realtors, but that's why I do this live, because it's not just some guy telling you something. It's something I've lived through and done myself and want to share and answer questions. But Anthony, I appreciate you answering. I appreciate everybody who's joined. Let me just show another slide because I want to go over this and drill down on this topic because it is so important. Let me see here. Where did it go? Sorry, it's taking me a second to find it. Oh, here. The economic report's coming this week. Thursday, CPI, Consumer Price Index. It's a great measure of inflation. And the 30-year bond auction, jobless claims is always big. This, for some reason, the sizing is jacked up. But on Friday, PPI, Producer Price Index, comes out. These are huge, awesome reports that you guys should go and look at. If you today go and Google BLS.gov CPI report, it comes out every month. And it's a great tool to help yourself see the industries, the companies that are impacting everyday Americans and why inflation is where it's at. And so then you look at Producer Price Index, so then you can see where the disparities are. But all of this information is aggregated for us to go and look, and they'll put out a PDF and you can read it. But not a lot of Americans know that these reports exist. And I'm like, why not? Let me share. So it comes out every month, BLS.gov. You can go read them yourself. But CPI comes out on Thursday, PPI on Friday. Go check those out. PCE is one of the Fed's favorite measure of inflation, but CPI and PPI are huge. So that's going to be market moving. And I'll keep you guys posted on it when it comes out tomorrow. But I always would like to share the calendars and different things that could impact the rates and all that jazz. And again, let me just show you one more time the home price appreciation data since 1942. I'm going to move my fat head out the way so you can screenshot this for your own records. And then I'm going to say why this is so important and use terms like cash on cash investment. So key in on 2021, 19% appreciation in 1 year. 2020, 10% appreciation in 1 year. 2022, 6. 2023, home price appreciation across the country was between 5 and 6%, and we're on trend for that this year. But we're going to look at a person buying a $300,000 house at the end of 2020 And we're going to show you kind of some numbers on what's called cash on cash return. So we're going to use a hypothetical scenario that somebody's buying a $300,000 house and they're going to use $10,000 to get into that home. They're getting some seller credits, some down payment and closing cost assistance. So their total out of pocket is 10 grand. Great. Keep that in mind. In that year, in 2021, home prices went up 19%. So let's call it 20 for easy math. If they bought a $300,000 house that appreciated 20%, that house is worth 360 grand now. So off of their $10,000 investment, they got $60,000 return. That is a massive return on investment, because in stocks, the index funds have averaged a 10% return over the last 30 plus years, which we want 10% return. If you use that same $10,000 to buy 10,000 shares of a stock that goes up 10%, that means you made $1,000 that year. That is why buying property is so important to building long-term generational wealth, because you cannot get your returns are based on the value of the property, not your initial cash investment. And it also, we're not even talking about the amazing tax incentives when you own a property. But the other thing I want to talk about is why people are falling further and further behind. Because look, somebody who didn't buy that $300,000 house in 2020 or 2021, that's 30% appreciation. So now that $300,000 house is $400,000. So they lost out on 100 grand in opportunity costs, but the average rents are $2,000 a month. So if you're paying $2,000 a month, that's 24 grand a year. You waited 2 years to buy. Now you're at almost $50,000 in rent that you paid out, and you didn't make the appreciation. So when you add the 50,000 to the 100,000 in missed appreciation gain, your total opportunity cost for waiting 2 years was $150,000. How many people can afford to lose $150,000 every 2 years? And that's the reason why many people are falling farther and farther behind, is they're waiting longer and longer to buy a house because they're getting dissuaded because of fake information online and people that are saying, oh, the housing market's going to crash and the prices are going to drop 15% in the next 2 years. The only time in our nation's history that home prices ever went down was between 2007 and 11, and one time in 1990. They didn't go down when rates were 20% in the 80s. They went down in 2007 and through 11 because we overbuilt and lax lending guidelines. Every other year, look at the crazy returns. So of course, as an investor, you got to put 20% down. So on that $300,000 house, remember in 2020, between 2020 and 2021, those homes went up over 20%. If you combine the 2 years, it's 29%. So say that person had to put 20% down. That's 60 grand. Well, if the home goes up 20%, and now that you made your 100% rate of return, these are amazing returns on investment. This is why investors want to buy it. And what was slowing them down before in the past was the fact of how to manage properties. But now there's big, huge companies that are specifically management companies, and these REITs, real estate investment trusts. That's where these big, huge companies are trying to get away, like, oh, we're not buying up individual properties. It's like saying, like I showed earlier, we pull that up. Because I love this graphic. When I hear people saying, oh, BlackRock isn't buying a property and whatever, it's like saying Kellogg's isn't making, or it doesn't make Cheez-Its. It's like, yeah, they own the company that makes Cheez-Its. That still counts. And so, like, that's what's going on here. And I showed this data because I had this discussion with somebody earlier on a couple of my lives. Like, Invitation Homes is the largest single family homeowner investor in the United States. Who owns it? You start to see it. Vanguard owns everything. BlackRock owns everything. All of these people own these companies. And when you pumping money into venture capital, which no hate on venture capital, I'm in a couple of different private equity and venture capital groups. They're great. But in my personal opinion, there needs to be a cap on how many single family residents an investor can purchase. I also don't think that private equity should have any business in residential real estate, period. Because in essence, when we allow that to happen, it sounds like it's great, But what ends up happening, and it continues to cause disparity between communities. And then, of course, you're going to have certain communities that get over policed, underfunded, and then the the big cities are not investing in those areas. So then what kind of businesses move in? The predatory type, payday loan places, check cashing places, pawn shops, liquor stores, gun stores. And then that again drives those community prices down. And then next thing you know, Karen comes with her coffee and her Uggs, and she's going to go revamp the community. And now that gets gentrified, and the investors come in and buy up all these properties because it's distressed, and the community, the people that were there, miss out on all the opportunity to grow their net worth because you don't have people going to the community and saying, hey, look, you can make this money if you do this type of thing to your property. Here's the loan structure, here's the options. Now you go sell this house for 600 grand instead of an investor. That's not what's happening, and that's what my little part of this internet is here to do, whether you use me or not. I hope that this kind of conversation sparks interest for you to start having these conversations, because it's an amazing opportunity. I shared earlier with the home price appreciation data, but this stuff needs to be taken seriously. And when you go and look at all this stuff, companies buying up everything, we have to be careful and we have to be cognizant of it. We have to define reality the way it is, not the way we want it to be, but we can work to make it what we want it to be. But right now, the truth is, all around the country, all around the United States, private equity groups, big investors are buying up inventory in mass, and it's scary. We can do our part to help educate regular people, to help make them feel encouraged to go ahead and do their own to invest. Because like I shared earlier on the live, or maybe it was last live, last month, I helped a family get into a $257,000 house. They got a check back at closing for $2,700. And because when you use down payment and closing cost assistance and the sellers give a credit, you're allowed to get back the amount you put in earnest, option, and appraisal. So that is called paid outside of closing, or POC costs. They were able to get all that back. I'm not the only guy that does this. There's plenty of loan officers on this app that can share and walk you through it. So don't feel like I'm the only one. This is information I freely give to everybody. Look into down payment and closing cost assistance programs. They're like in every freaking state. Look at them up. Talk to your loan officer. Ask them which programs they work with, the pros and cons. There's going to be a big difference between if it's a grant or if it's a forgivable second lien. But don't be afraid if it is a forgivable second lien. Because I'm going to use T-Shack for an example. It's one of my favorite programs here in North Texas. T-Shack, what they'll do is they have the grant, which is considered a gift. There's no repayment period. They also have a 3-year forgivable second lien. And so what that means is, and they give up to 5% assistance based on the total loan amount. So if your loan amount's $300,000, they give you 5%. They're giving you 15 grand, which pretty much covers all of your down payment and closing costs. And that's where it's like, it's an amazing opportunity. Because if somebody would have come to most people when they're younger, especially around tax time when they're getting 2, 3, 4 grand back from their taxes, and say, hey, instead of going and buying rims or going and buying something stupid, buy a house that's going to help you grow your net worth, and it's only going to cost you 3 or 4 grand out of pocket, and you might get that back. Why wouldn't they do it? Especially if they've been renting with their buddies or whatever. It's like, cool, buy a property and rent to your buddies. Go buy a duplex and rent to your friends, and start your journey to building your real estate portfolio so that you don't have to work. Like, our country is going in a direction that are trying to force us to working past in our late 70s and early 80s. Screw that. Not on my watch. I don't want that. I want people to be able to go out and on vacation, have fun, and have freedom. And you can do that through properly managing your equity position in your home. And like, for instance, the reason why you have to do that is strategically managing your equity position is, say you were in a home 3 to 6 years. Why is that important? Because you're getting past the potential to have to pay capital gains tax as a primary residence. After 2 years, make sure you talk with the CPA, your tax professional, to get the terms so you can properly plan your exit strategy for your properties. Because say you have student loan debt, it's hard to pay that, or credit cards or whatever. If You get a property, you're and start to pay that off. 2, 3 years go down the road. Now you've built up equity. You can sell your house, use that equity to free up capital, pay off debts, buy your next house, live in it a couple of years, and by that point you don't have debt because now you've built up equity. And when you sell, put 6 months to 12 months of your expenses into an account that's like your monthly debt servicing account. So now everything you make goes into savings, high yield savings accounts, investments. So then once a quarter, you're making a line item move over to keep your debt servicing account full. It totally changes your way of living when you're able to make those kinds of moves. But most people can't because the way that the United States system is set up is to make us into debt servicing people. And the equity we have in homes can totally transform in class and allow people to class jump. Because if you've got 3, 4, 500,000 sitting in equity in your home and you sell, that's your money. Take it, use a little portion of it to go buy your next property, but then use the rest of it to pay off every debt. So now you're not in debt, and look at opportunities to invest in the future. And don't be risky. Make sure it's prudent and suitable for your financial goals and talk with a financial advisor. If you have freed up capital and you're no longer servicing debt, some people are paying $1,000 a month for a regular car. Why are you servicing a car loan at that number when if you could be putting that $1,000 a month into index funds? Go on. I challenge everybody on this live. Look up an investment calculator, put in 10% return, $1,000 a month contribution, and see what that does over a 7-year period. It'll make you puke. But why do you think car companies want you to get a loan from them and have it on a 6, 7-year term? Because they're investing their money that they're getting. Yes, they have a car, but the car is a collateral. It's just a widget that they're saying, hey, you do this, you pay me this so I can get a consistent amount of money that comes in so that I can go invest it in the marketplace. Same thing with insurance and life insurance. And all of this is all based on them reinvesting your money. I want you to make the money instead of them. So get a house, stay in it a couple of years, watch the equity position, know your debts, try to limit them as much as possible, and know when to sell, when to get the next property. But not that you always have to buy bigger and bigger homes. We don't have keeping up with the Joneses is antiquated. It is outdated. I think that that's one of the most refreshing things that I've seen as a loan officer is people no longer trying to push their max budget up to this super big, huge number. Buy what you can comfortably afford because being able to travel is huge. And especially now with ADUs, accessory dwelling units, being something that can be utilized in most financing, it's huge. So think about it. If you buy a house like where I'm at here in North Texas, Richardson has a lot of properties with ADUs, accessory dwelling units, which helps for, especially with different cultures where they are multi-generational, where they'll come in and, maybe their mother-in-law needs a place or their father-in-law or their parents and they're going into retirement age. We're about to have a huge boom of retirement people leaving the workforce and going into retirement. And most people don't have a very good, concise plan in place. But if you can get ahead of that, work with your parents and say, hey, look, let's go look for a property. Let's downsize you from your home. Like this is something that me and my parents are in the middle of discussing because they have a property in Bowie. It's way too big for them. They don't need it. Sell that home, move into an accessory dwelling unit in the backyard. And now you have a place. And if you can get ahead of that and you can start putting in family planning now for your parents, if you know they're about to get into retirement age, even if it's 5, 10 years out, 3 years out, start talking to your financial advisors now, your mortgage loan officers now, to get an exit strategy in place for them and for you so that you can get into a position where you're not paying $100,000 a year to put them into a facility, a care facility, because there's ways for you to be able to help maintain your parents, make the money and not be exposed to risk. Because there's typically I think it's 3 or 5 year look back with Medicare and some of these programs where if your parents had a property and they had to get care from the government, they can try to seize those assets. And that's not cool. Like nobody wants that. So this is why it's important to develop a relationship with a licensed residential mortgage loan officer, financial advisor, and your realtor so that you can build that relationship and they can put a game plan in place with you to make sure you're achieving your goals and vision for the future. And if you know your numbers, if you know what you need to make monthly in order to be able to retire or leave your job, then you can put a game plan in place and it makes it attainable. Maybe it's quicker than you think. Maybe it's only 5 years out. Imagine if you could put a game plan in place where you could be free in 5 years. The 5 years is going to pass whether we like it or not. It's just, are you going to start on the right tracks that's going to get you to your destination in that 5 year period? And most people, when they start to execute a plan, end up getting to their destination faster. And that's the part that's exciting. So, say you need to make $6,000 a month, $10,000 a month, whatever the number is, cool. Now we need to identify the opportunities that will give me passive income, fourplex, duplex. Maybe it's building up this and then selling those to go buy a 20-unit apartment community, whatever it is. Get a game plan in place. It's not scary, and you don't be intimidated if you don't own any properties to get the game plan in place now, because that's the perfect way to do it. So you have a good plan, so you're not just fumbling through and trying to figure it out. Work with professionals. They care. This is important. Again, the last thing I'm going to pull up one more time for the people that just joined the live is the home price appreciation data since 1942. This is so important that you need to pay attention to this and understand why people are falling behind. Oh, I forgot to share, also this, screenshot that. This is housing formations versus completions. This will help you project why there's an inventory shortage. Since 2015, housing formations have outpaced completions significantly. That's why prices continue to rise. Here's home price appreciation data since 1942. Keep in mind, 2023, home prices went up between 5 and 6%. We're on track for that in 2024. Amazing. Save it. But if you have questions, reach out to me. If you missed a part of this live, don't worry. I usually post it on my YouTube channel within a day or so of the live. If you have questions, email me, get on my calendar. I'd love the chance and opportunity to talk with you, add value, and make sure that you're set up for success. Oh, I almost forgot. Let's see if I have that. If I don't, I'll just do it on my live tomorrow. But it's about my next upcoming Lunch and Learn, a capital title at the end of the month. If I don't have the slide, I will bring it next time. Oh, I'll talk about it tomorrow. All right, have a good one, you guys. I appreciate you.